Hello and welcome to Beyond the Boundary, the show that tackles issues, not players. Joining me today is my co-host James Stewart. James, how are you going?
Feeling good, pretty good.
You just got back from Sydney. Tell us a bit about that.
So I went to Sydney on Friday night and came back on Monday. I was there shoutcasting for the Rainbow Six Siege APAC LAN finals.
It's sort of esports, isn't it?
Esports, that's right, yeah.
Great. So we'll talk about that a bit later. Sounds like you're pretty passionate about that. And speaking of passions, we have a story on a collector that we're going to have a look at now.
My name is Stuart Doyle and I'm retired and just give 2 days a week here at the shop. I was a former cyclist and then after giving up the cycling, I was asked would I start giving my things on the microphone and at live venues. So that led to Commonwealth Games, 3 Commonwealth Games, calling the events. And that all led, of course, into the Olympic Games in 2000. And that gave me travel. I went to other countries. You know, I used to get a bit of passion and put a bit of life into it. And I went to England and New Zealand and Hawaii and Japan and called the cycling, which was great. Well, we've got signs here such as from the MCG that we're on trams that took people up to the MCG in the early days, you know, going back probably, 30, 40 years. The MCG sign was always one that brings, a lot of joy looking at it, but there's a lot of great things in the shop that when we actually sell them, we get sad about them, because they'll probably never be seen again. Yes, yeah, look, I'd always listen to people. If they said they had certain things, then I would ask, could I have a look? And then I would tell them my intention to buy, like bicycles, old bicycles. So, I bought a few things like that just by asking questions and talking to people such as I am to you. This is my son's shop, Cameron Doyle, who he played with the Collingwood Football Club for a short time and then played VFA football with Preston and Coburg. Well, he's about 52 years of age. He owns the shop now and a lot of the things here he buys, he sources things out more so because he's a school teacher. This is something that's on the side. And he goes out interstate, he goes out and drives out the country roads and, calls in on farms and things if he thinks that looks attractive, that they may have things of interest. And he always had a passion because of my passion, I suppose, that rubbed off on him. And he wanted to collect things and, VFA things and AFL or more so the VFL. Everything we have in this shop too is more of the older. We don't like the new, we like things that are old. Maybe because, the thought of it going out of existence, not being around as much today. But the pleasing thing about it is that the younger people, such as yourselves, that younger ones are now starting to turn. The tide has changed and, with so many apartments around in Melbourne particularly, they're putting in ice cream cones or destination rolls in their new apartments. And that's good, because then they can value the things of old. This bear, I think we paid $8,000 for it. And that's Senate's, which was an ice cream company. And they were taken over by Streets, I think it was. And when Streets bought the company, they told all the representatives to go around Australia and smash them all. The disposable things that today, like when you go and buy something in Coles or Woolworths, it's in a cardboard box, you throw it away. But in the days of old, if you can see some of the tins here, what biscuits come in and things like that, that's why, they're great. There's a bit of history there. It's got atmosphere and, today it's so different. So that's why antique things are, more things that you want to collect, or we do.
Hello and welcome back to Beyond the Boundary. Wasn't that great? I just love seeing people and their passions.
People who are just talking about things that they absolutely adore, it really inspires you.
Yeah, that guy, he had such a great voice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I really liked that kind of nasally, but just typically Australian kind of voice that he had going for him.
Yeah, we went there a couple of weeks ago. I know I was involved in the shoot. He took us through his store. He's got everything you could possibly think of, and it's, you sort of wonder, well, who would actually want to buy that stuff. But you sort of, as he was talking about, see people wanting to put them in their houses, like the old retro signs and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, people actually see a value in these things. I mean, it's great to see that it's not just, 1 in 1,000 people that actually have this passion. People can appreciate it even if it isn't their main passion, and they like putting it in their houses and they like collecting it.
Yeah. So speaking of, of his voice, obviously he was a commentator, and you actually did some commentating up in Sydney. Yeah,
so I went to Sydney on Friday, and I went up and commentated for an esports event. There was a LAN, an international LAN, for the entire of APAC, which is the Asia Pacific region. So there were teams from Australia, teams from Korea, teams from Japan, and teams from Southeast Asia. Yeah, it's a fantastic event to be a part of.
Now we're going to have a look at a story on esports. Esports stands for electronic sport, and it's basically competitive video gaming.
He doesn't get the second.
Leopard is going to drop. Paginis is going to be in a position to just take him down after he drops into the hatch. And now we are going to see him challenging onto Tilted. Oh, and he takes down a really nice kill, but Anarchy gets the refrag. Tilted now has to get this kill to save it for his team, and he does just in time. Very well played.
Hi, my name is James. I go by DevMartyr online. I'm 19 years old and I'm heavily involved in esports. Esports is competitive video games. So it's when you play a game like it's a sport. And there's competitions. There's prize pools.
Your first ever two-time world champions.
There are organizations involved, and yeah, it's about being the best. My interest in esports started from a particular game because I was particularly interested in the strategy and what set it apart from other games. But I find it interesting to see all the different levels of analysis that come through, and that's why I got into casting as well. Casting in regular sports, most people would call it commentating. So when I started, I had a lot of support behind me, and I just realized I watched these videos of people casting these online matches, and instead of focusing necessarily on what people were doing in the game, saying, wow, that was a really, really nice thing that they did there, I was noticing what they were saying, what the casters were commentating, and I thought, wow, I could do that. And then when my internet speed was fast enough to host and upload stream, I actually could do that. Basically, the casters participate in the match as a spectator, and they get to control the camera where it's looking, and they get to put it into OBS, which is a program that allows you to manipulate different elements on the screen. So they can add scores, they can add overlays, they can add countdown timers. Yeah, it's definitely kind of like being an all-in-one director, cameraman, commentator, analysis, all in one. From when most matches that we cast is just one person controlling all of it, but at the the high-end professional level at LANs in the studio, they have one dedicated person to controlling the spectator camera. They have 2 dedicated people just to casting, and they'll have a separate production team behind the scenes doing all of the instant replays, all of the graphics manipulation, and all of the scenes changing. But nonetheless, you can still do it just with one person. You can still control all of that just to a slightly less comprehensive extent, but you can still do it all just by yourself, which is really great. I'm actually going to be going to Sydney next weekend for the Australian Pacific LAN to do casting. I've been invited there.
With hundreds of millions of hardcore gamers and thousands of global tournaments each year, computer games are well on their way to becoming the world's biggest sports. And at the center of everything is a whole new breed of celebrity, the esports superstar.
there are celebrities, but it's really quite human. Everyone can interact with everyone. The level of interaction within esports is fantastic because you can interact with people who you see on the streams, people who get interviewed for the matches, people who are winning huge amounts of money in competitions. You can actually play with them, you can actually talk to them, you can watch their streams, and you can send them messages on their streams. I know friends who have had replies from, you know, celebrities within the scene while watching their streams, and it makes it really accessible and really nice because you feel more connected to these people and they feel more like actual people instead of just an icon. And you can still idolize them and view them as something really great and something to aspire to, and you see qualities in them that you really want to have. You say, wow, that's an amazing level of skill, I really want to get to that level. Or maybe, wow, that was a really nice, that's just a really nice guy, I really want to be like that. So people still role model while acting like human beings. So it's kind of a lot more like when you look at your friend and you say, wow, he's really good at that, she's really good at that, I want to be like that, that inspires me, rather than looking at some icon on the television and saying, wow, that person is perfect, I want to be that human being. So how the game might compare to traditional sports, there's actually a lot of things in common with perhaps a game like basketball. Individual skill in basketball can get you a very long way because you might be able to dribble it all the way up to the end of the court and then score a goal by yourself. In the same way, in this game, you might be able to run in and you might be able to take down the 5 enemy players all by yourself. But at the highest level of competition, it's incredibly difficult. And it's not likely that you're going to be able to get that because everyone has a certain level of skill that you're not really going to be able to pass. Similar to basketball, when you're in the NBA, you're not going to be able to, even doesn't matter how good you are, you're not going to be able to dribble past all 5 players on the other team and then score a goal uncontested. It's just not really possible.
Tournaments can have million-dollar prize pools. With sponsors like Samsung and telcos, their teams are run like football franchises, with managers, agents and training camps.
So there are lots of different levels of where you can be within competitive esports because the scene has so much variety, from just the entry level, someone in a team who's just starting out, lower skill level. What sets that apart separately from the international scene is that in the international scene there's a lot more at stake because there's a lot more sponsorship involvement and a lot more companies like ESL, which is the primary esports company. These companies have a lot more invested into those regions. There's higher prize pools and there's more at stake, and so teams just generally get a lot bigger. They're sponsored by bigger organizations and they have more time to put into the practice themselves. Maybe they can afford not to have a day job. That's what really sets apart the top teams in the Australian and New Zealand region and within the rest of the world. I wear a lot of different hats in my own personal esports scene. I am a player, so I love playing. I love playing for a team. I love scrimming and I love competing. But another hat that I wear is also as the general manager for an esports organization called Team Obsidian. And it's a relatively small organization. Basically what I do as part of that is organize pretty much every asset of what we do, whether it's communicating with individual teams that teams that we're already a part of, teams that we're already sponsor, teams that we'd like to sponsor, communicating with new teams, making sure that all the teams are organized in whatever leagues that they're participating in. Sometimes tournaments have funds that you have to give in order to actually participate in them, so we try and cover those. But as a relatively small organization, you actually have to get funding from somewhere, so that's the other side, is getting an actual sponsor. There are other scenes, much bigger scenes like Counter-Strike and League of Legends. These are really big scenes that are quite difficult to get into because when a team who plays Counter-Strike is looking for an organization to represent them, they're looking for funds. Whereas when, for example, a Rainbow Six team is looking for an organization, they're not necessarily looking for funds, they're looking for support. And so luring in the teams comes down to quite a few things depending on what you can offer them.
Yeah, it's always been fascinating to me how certain games get taken seriously. Like certain games garner respect, like chess. If you are a really good chess player, like, oh, he's a sophisticated gentleman.
Crazy Danish.
He's a chess player.
Yeah.
What do you do for a living? I play chess. Whoa, interesting. What do you do for a living? Oh, I play video games. Oh, you dork.
Esports is a perpetually growing scene, and it's always going to be getting bigger and bigger, and it's constantly changing, and no one can predict where it's going to be 5 years from now, let alone, 6 months from now. We really don't know what's going to happen next. And I really personally hope that it's going to get a lot more respect. Sometimes, people ask what I do all the time, and I don't really feel comfortable saying, because there's just a level of judgment that people have because they don't understand. And I'm really hoping that it's going to be something that people respect enough for me to comfortably just say to everyone, yeah, this is what I do. And realistically, I think that that's going to be a slow progress, but things are definitely getting better and things are definitely getting bigger. And there's been all kinds of talks about esports being seen as an actual sport, a regular sport. People have talked about bringing it to international competitions like the Olympics. Like AFL, the Australian Football League, has talked about sponsoring esports teams. So I think there's a lot of positive things coming in the future, and we're just going to have to see how it works out. Personally, I'm really looking forward to pursuing casting and playing and managing. I'm just looking to always improve on every aspect of what I do, and keen to see where I go with it.
Wow, what a great story, James. Well done.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed doing that one.
Yeah, great. Can you tell me a bit about it?
So basically I was contacted by you asking if I wanted to do an interview about the thing that I'm passionate about. Just like we were talking before, it's all about passions. And once I start talking about something I'm passionate about, I don't really stop. One of my weaknesses. So we had talking points, and we talked about everything. We talked about all the different components of esports. There's so many different parts to it, and we just kept on going and going.
Yeah. So why are people like you, and also it used to be sort of like a niche sort of thing. When people think of esports and gamers, like you think of a parent telling their child to go outside, something like that. But I mean, with the amount of people and money, there has to be a mass amount of people. When people are investing millions and millions of dollars into it, why isn't it a niche thing anymore?
Well, it really has gone to the mainstream. People are realizing that this is a thing that's no longer just kind of, oh, they do that, do they? Is that what they do? It's actually something that has become an industry. It's actually become a real industry. There are companies that are investing their money into it, and people who are dedicating their time, whether that's voluntarily. I've worked with so many beautiful volunteers who have put in so much effort, and people who have actually managed to, lucky for them, make it into a job, something that they can make a living out of. So it comes down to having an audience. And when it's actually amazing at how successful esports has been at drawing audiences.
Yep.
Platforms like Twitch in particular, YouTube as well, but particularly Twitch, have really let esports blossom into a proper full-blown industry that people go and they see the live streams, they get notifications, and it's a new age of television, really.
Yeah, exactly. So, there's talk about people who don't really use newspapers anymore. Well, people aren't really watching TV as much anymore. And, esports is primarily streamed online on the internet. When esports was first starting up, there was a big push to get it to television. But it sort of got, never really fit in the television sort of time slot. It didn't really cater to that audience. So, they chuck it online, stream it to mass audience, and and they're getting more views than regular season, even final NBA season games. I know the 2013 League of Legends Championship got 32 million online viewers. And these numbers are just staggering.
It's amazing the audiences that have been drawn into it. People are, it's become validated. And that's what's fantastic. Previously, if you say, oh, I'm just watching a sports program, people will be like, all right, you're into sport, all right. But now when you're watching an esports program, it's kind of like that. It's no longer, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
What are you doing? And it's fantastic that it's become so mainstream and it's being brought to so many people. I talk to my parents about it. I talk to my girlfriend about it. We all get really into it. And people who don't really seem to have such a passion about it, they can still understand it in the same way that someone can come up to me and be like, hey, James, so that AFL match on the weekend, I'll be like, yeah, I totally know about AFL. Let's just keep talking.
Yeah.
But I can have an interest in it. And it's the same thing with esports right now.
Yeah, of course.
So it's fantastic with the level of production that goes into this. So this weekend I went to the land that we talked about in the video, and I was on camera casting, and I looked at the stream afterwards. 5,000, 7,000 people were watching. I mean, I'm honoured to have been part of that production, but behind the scenes there are so many people involved, whether it's the stage admins standing behind the players, enforcing everything, whether it's the dozens of people in the production room hidden behind all those huge monitors and computers on those replay wheels.
Yeah, it's really the same as any other sport production.
Absolutely. And every time you see footage of the backstage of what it looks like when they're actually producing the AFL, it looks exactly the same as what they did last weekend at the LAN.
Yeah, it really gives it sort of, that last push of validation. Great. So after the ad break, we're going to have a look at highlights from water polo, another sport is similar to esports.